What is up guys, welcome back to another GeekaWhat video, and today we're looking at Corsair's latest case release, the Spec-06, the newest addition to their more value oriented spec lineup. This thing aims to bring a shed load of features and functionality to a more affordable price tag, but are just too many sacrifices made? Let's take a look and find out. Now, first and foremost, this case comes in two colours. I went for the more stealthy black option here, with some white accenting, though a white more in-your-face version, if you will, is also available. And I'll link both with up-to-date pricing for a range of regions and retailers in the description down below. Now, the standout feature of this case is definitely the LED strip up front. I've got an RGB model here which features an RGB addressable strip up front which diffuses phenomenally. The light spread is so even, it just looks so expensive. Now, this LED strip is pre-wired up to a controller that sits in a weird yet surprisingly convenient place at the back of the unit. You can cycle through modes, change the colour and adjust speed settings accordingly to really give something that looks quite nice and adds a bit of something special to the case. You'll also notice here that the front panel is spaced quite generously from the front of the metal chassis, which is going to allow for some greater airflow room. Now, talking of airflow, you do only get two fans included of a 120mm variety, and perhaps more disappointingly, neither of these are RGB, nor do they feel particularly premium. That being said, the options for upgrades are there, with support for a 120mm fan or radiator in the back, a 240mm unit up top, and up to a 360mm radiator in the front. It is worth noting that with a 360 rad or a 240 rad up front, at the bottom end of the case, you won't have quite enough room for a push-pull configuration due to clearance with the power supply shield. Now, whilst I really would not recommend this case for a custom water cooling loop, an all-in-one cooler on your CPU and or GPU could look really nice and improve the cooling performance quite dramatically. It would have been nice to see a third fan included here, and perhaps one with RGB, just to add a bit more airflow or a bit more pizzazz to the system, if you will. However, with this being a more budget-oriented chassis, it isn't a major criticism from me. The case supports up to full-size ATX motherboards, with the smaller ITX and MATX sizes also of course supported. I must credit this case on the number of rubber grommets featured around the motherboard tray and on the power supply shield, which is going to allow you to route your cables as efficiently as possible and keep them as hidden as possible, which is really important. It's also worth noting that cable management isn't perhaps the strongest attribute of this case when looking to the rear, given the fairly limited amount of room. That being said, with a bit more effort than you might normally have to put in, you can use the plentiful supply of cable loops and included cable ties to get a fairly clean and polished looking system. It is worth noting, of course, with a case of this price point, that you probably aren't going to be cramming a crap load of hardware in here. You're not going to have 2 or 3 graphics cards and 4 or 5 hard drives, which does alleviate much of the need for plentiful cable management room. The case also boasts support for 2 3.5-inch drives and up to 4 2.5-inch SSDs. The hard drive cage is hidden nicely behind the power supply shield and is removable to give you room for more cable management or also a longer power supply that requires some more clearance. One thing I really like about this case, and arguably its favourite feature for me, is the inclusion of a vertical GPU mount. You can see I've utilised it here with this pretty hefty GTX 1080 Ti, and it looks seriously superb. It allows you to showcase what's going to be the most prominent and most expensive part of really any modern gaming PC build, and just really adds a whole new dynamic to a case at this lower price point. You will need to buy a PCIe riser cable, though these are fairly inexpensive, and cases with mounts like this don't tend to come with them as standard. It is worth noting that clearance may be somewhat of an issue. This is a very compact ATX case and really doesn't waste too much room, which means that 2.5 or triple slot graphics cards like this obscenely big Zotac 1080 Ti will just about squeeze in here, and you may have some airflow issues. Standard 2-slot cards such as Asus's Strix cooler will work absolutely no problem though. Moving on to the I/O on this case, it's another area in which my seal of approval is granted. With USB 3 in 2 ports, HD audio, so headphone and microphone jacks, and power and reset, it covers all the necessary bases. USB-C and multiple more USB 3 ports are of course features saved for higher end chassis, and the only complaint that some people may have here is the top mounting, which could be cumbersome if this chassis is mounted high up on a desk, for example. Overall, this case really has impressed me. I think it strikes a perfect balance between the feature set and the actual functions available to you as a user, and also the price point it demands. It is perhaps a little bit more expensive than some would like, though it is worth noting Corsair cases usually set you back just a little bit more than those from Thermaltake or Cooler Master, for example, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. I think the RGB strip at the front is executed on perfectly, really nicely diffused, and the dust filtered intakes with good drive mounting options top this case off for me. Once again, I'll repeat my point earlier about perhaps a third fan or one that's RGB in the rear, but I understand this is a budget case and you've got to remember it has to be segmented in some way from Corsair's higher end offerings. If you'd like to pick this case up, I'll link it in the description below. If you enjoyed today's video, smash that like button, do subscribe, and as always, we'll see you in the next GeekaWhat video.